Island. One word that evokes a place like no other. A place of mystery and adventure, or a haven of tranquility. Everything on an island traveled there, sometimes only to disappear. Some islands are home to plants and animals that exist nowhere else on Earth. An island is a life-saving solid land surrounded by a fluid world that may stretch as far as the horizon. The names of islands reveal their variety: Desolation, Silhouette, the Isle of Skye, Murderer's Island, the Isles of the Bingo Sea. According to Native American lore, a raven searched the primordial waters for a place to land. Finding none, the bird dropped pebbles to make the first islands. In ancient times, islands were believed to be enchanted because they could vanish, shrouded in mist. A remote island evokes mystery and a profound sense of isolation. Some islanders count on an isolated setting and flock to it. Ocean-dwelling animals like sea lions depend on islands as places to breed and rest. Sea lions must bear their young on land, and an island may be the only land for miles around. Still, danger is never far away. The Falkland Islands in the South Atlantic are the world's largest breeding ground for rockhopper and gentoo penguins. Other species, too, have their favorite island sanctuaries. When a site is strictly for the birds, it makes a perfect nursery, uninhabited and undisturbed by others. An island may seem to float, but if the surrounding ocean is removed, it shows its roots in the Earth's crust. Just what makes an island an island? Australia looks like an overgrown island, but an island that big counts as a continent. In fact, it's generally agreed that the largest island in the world is Greenland. It's a continental island, a place where the continental shelf sticks up out of the sea. If Greenland were a nation, instead of part of Denmark, it would be the 13th largest in the world, right after Saudi Arabia. In contrast, some countries consist of thousands of smaller islands. A Japanese myth tells the story of how that nation's nearly 4,000 islands were created. The god Izanagi, together with his goddess wife, Izanami, stirred Earth's shapeless mass with a jeweled spear. The mixture thickened, and an island took form. The pair came to live on that island, and from it they gave birth to all the Japanese islands. Finland claims to have the most islands of any country, 179,584 at last count, though Canada may have even more. Even landlocked countries may have lakes and rivers. One of the few that has none is Mali, in the heart of Africa. But across the globe, 1 in every 10 people lives on an island. Most islands lie close to the continents, but some stand isolated in mid-ocean. These are the islands most often born in volcanic drama, when lava builds up from an opening in the ocean floor. Only after erosion by wind and water has been at work for thousands of years can a volcanic island take on its jagged green beauty. The same processes that create such an island can threaten it, with more eruptions, earthquakes, and the giant waves called tsunamis. According to legend, the most advanced island civilization of its time met a catastrophic death. The lost island of Atlantis, said to have sunk beneath the sea. Could Atlantis have been the very real island of Santorini? Around 1600 BC, the Greek island was devastated. by a massive volcanic blast. Its rich culture was buried in ash and pumice, and a deluge, a tsunami as tall as a 65-story building. As theories about the identity of Atlantis rise and fall, Santorini remains the leading contender. Thousands of islands are sprinkled across the tropics, so to many of us, an island seems by definition warm and welcoming, a place to escape to, and maybe add some local color of one's own. Beyond the tropics lie islands less inviting. James Cook, the 18th century English explorer, described South Georgia, lands doomed by nature to perpetual frigidness, whose horrible and savage aspect I have not words to describe. The world's most isolated island is Tristan da Cunha in the South Atlantic. It has no airport, and from the island, a sailboat would take about 10 days to reach the nearest inhabited land. Yet about 300 people live on Tristan. More accessible locations fill up fast. The islands of Manhattan, Hong Kong, and Singapore are some of the world's most densely populated places. Some islands have existed for millions of years. Others come and go. Most coastal islands come into being only because of a change in sea level. Water floods the valleys and leaves the hills cut off. Other spots are islands only when the tide comes in. At Holy Island off Britain, visitors who lose track of the time can become unwitting islanders. Some islands manage to break the ocean surface only for a few years before being eroded away by the waves. And yet the Maldive Islands survive despite being generally lower than the average basketball player. As fast as some islands disappear, others are born. One of the biggest new islands is Surtsey. It surfaced in 1963 off the coast of Iceland. Surtsey is named for Surtur, the fire giant of Norse mythology. According to Egyptian myth, the first dry land was an island. The god Geb, who took the form of a goose called the Great Cackler, alighted on it and laid the world egg. From it came the first life. Birds are often the first arrivals on a new island, but far from their natural predators, they may lose their ability to fly, like New Zealand's kiwi. When an island bird thrives on a particular plant, it's often no accident. The seeds probably arrived at precisely the same time the bird did, carried in its digestive system or attached to its feathers. Some seeds make the journey unaided. The coconut palm probably originated near present-day Indonesia and Malaysia. Coconuts float easily, and palms are one of the few plants that can grow in sand. It's said that coconuts have as many uses as there are days in a year, from food and drink to buildings, baskets, mats, and clothing. Even hermit crabs can create a mobile home from the discarded shells, while tough ropes and threads come from the coir fiber on coconut husks. Although plants can colonize quickly, remote oceanic islands often lay desolate for millennia until there were enough arrivals to breed or take hold. It takes stamina and luck for most animals to get to an island. Some hitch a ride. On a piece of driftwood, a tiny gecko lizard reaches the end of a long ocean voyage and swims ashore. It's a particularly tough trip for mammals, with one exception: bats. One kind of island is actually constructed by animals, a coral island, forms when the skeletons of primitive marine animals build up atop each other until they reach the ocean's surface. A coral atoll looks like a ring of small islands, but if the sea is drained away, it becomes clear that the islands formed around an ancient volcano that later collapsed. The constellation of South Pacific islands made tempting targets for another group of colonizers, humans. Perhaps the most remarkable of all island explorers were the Polynesians. Having no knowledge of any other humans, they called themselves the people. 2,000 years before Christopher Columbus began his exploits, they ventured across the Pacific, navigating by the pattern of ocean swells and the stars. The Polynesians were at home on the sea. They traveled across a huge triangle stretching from New Zealand to Hawaii and on to Easter Island. Their outrigger canoes could carry everything needed to survive a long voyage and to colonize a new island. The Polynesians' feats of island exploration are unmatched in recorded history. They relied on natural signs to find land. Dolphins often led the way toward new islands. Frigate birds overhead were a sure sign that land was close by, and certain cloud formations signaled the existence of land while it was still over the horizon. The allure of the South Seas islands and their people reached far across the globe. In the 19th century, Paul Gauguin, the French painter, was just one of the Europeans drawn to Polynesia. The beauty of the islands is said to be his greatest inspiration. Wherever the Polynesians traveled, they found inspiration in the unique wildlife of the islands, like the tropic bird, with an aerial courtship dance in which it actually flies backwards. On an island, wildlife may face few predators. With no need to develop new defenses, a species could remain unchanged for millions of years. New Zealand's tuatara reptiles are living relics from the time of the dinosaurs. Or in such splendid isolation, a species may evolve to be unlike any other on Earth. Fiji is the home of the kula bird, whose feathers were once used as currency. And the island's megapod birds were named for their oversized feet. It was in the Galapagos Islands in the Pacific, with their unique and specialized wildlife, that Charles Darwin, the great British naturalist, found proof for his theory of evolution. The island's reptiles and half their plant and bird life were found nowhere else in the world. Other islands have unique creatures too. Tasmania, off the Australian coast, is the sole domain of the Tasmanian devil. It uses some of the most powerful jaws on Earth to consume bones, fur, and feathers until nothing is left of its prey. But for unusual wildlife, one island has all the others beat: Madagascar, off the east coast of Africa. 80% of its plants and animals are unique to the island, including its leaping, dancing lemurs and its bizarre spiny forest. Komodo Island in Indonesia is home to the Komodo dragon, the world's largest lizard. Island meat eaters often grow larger than their continental cousins. Island vegetarians tend to be smaller. Weighing just 2 ounces, Madagascar's mouse lemurs are the smallest primates in the world. As for plant life, one islander bears the world's largest and heaviest seed. The coco de mer, a giant species of palm, lives only on the Seychelles Islands. Each of its seeds can weigh up to 44 pounds. The hefty kernels were believed to yield a powerful brew, an irresistible love potion. According to legend, the male and female cocodemera trees mate by moonlight, uprooted by passion. While some species live it up on the islands, others never get there. Hawaii was once even more idyllic than now. It had no mosquitoes at all until they were introduced. Ireland and New Zealand remain entirely free of snakes. An island may be a place one longs to reach, but it may become a place one longs to escape. A small band of islanders discovered the potential for disaster. Isolated in the Pacific, they believed their nearest neighbors were on the moon, until Dutch explorers arrived on Easter Sunday, 1722. Easter Island had been settled for more than 1,000 years. Its hundreds of massive stone figures paid homage to the island's chiefs. Some of the statues were taller than a 4-story building. How had they been moved into place on an island devoid of trees? The discovery of charred wood revealed that sleds had been used to move the statues. But the islanders had used up timber at such a rate that the island became deforested. Without trees, they could no longer build boats. Ferocious warfare racked the island. Easter Islanders became prisoners of their homeland. Any island can seem like a prison, especially if it was never the intended destination. In 1866, a remote island south of New Zealand was the only hope for the survivors of a shipwreck. They used a single match that had stayed dry in one man's hair to light a fire that was never allowed to die. The castaways struggled for a year and a half before they were rescued. The most famous castaway story in literature was inspired by real events. Robinson Crusoe is based on the experiences of a Scottish sailor, Alexander Selkirk, who asked to be marooned in the South Pacific after arguments with his captain. When Selkirk was rescued, he survived alone on the island for 5 years. The Mutiny on the Bounty is also based on a true story. Descendants of the ship's mutineers who intermarried with Tahitians still live on Pitcairn Island in the Pacific. Pitcairn is the world's tiniest nation, and with only about 60 residents, it's also the least populated. In the years around 1700, some island explorers were searching for out-of-the-way places, pirates looking for remote islands on which to bury their plundered riches. One pirate, Long John Silver, gave the world such vivid expressions as 15 men on a dead man's chest, yo-ho-ho, and a bottle of rum. He may be a fictional pirate, the villain of the novel Treasure Island, but Dead Man's Chest is a real island in the West Indies, and real-life pirates were at least as colorful. The most notorious robbers, Blackbeard, Captain Kidd, Jean Lafitte, each had their favorite hiding places, but the original X marks the spot Treasure Island is probably Cocos Island, halfway between San Francisco and Santiago in Chile, an ideal location for burying riches plundered from Central and South America. Virtually none of its legendary loot has ever been dug up. Not all pirates were men. 2 women who lived and looted as men were captured and sentenced to hang. Both were pregnant and pleaded for mercy. Mary Read died of fever, age 29, before she could be executed. Anne Bonny was spared and vanished from history. Pirates deserve their fearsome reputations. One common punishment among them was marooning on a desert island with only a bottle of water, a pistol, and a small amount of ammunition, just enough for the unfortunate sailor to take his own life. For seafaring traders, the risks of piracy and shipwreck were outweighed by the chance to make a fortune. The Spice Islands of the East Indies lured traders to the nutmeg, cloves, and mace which grew nowhere else. The spices provided a much-needed way for Europeans to flavor and preserve food. One surprising source of island wealth was bird droppings, or guano. For many years, this stuff was dug up from remote islands and sold as fertilizer. The lure of trade brought settlers to even the coldest and most remote islands, many of which became valuable bases for whaling, fishing, and mineral prospecting. When outsiders came calling, some isolated island populations experienced extreme culture shock. In the late 19th century, many South Seas islanders were staggered by the abundant possessions of Westerners, the wealth called cargo. Many believed such riches must have once belonged to their own forebears, and that through ancestor worship they could reclaim it. The new religions that sprang up were known as cargo cults. The English poet John Donne wrote that no man is an island. Every man is a piece of the continent. But throughout history, some men and women, in search of the contemplative life, have removed themselves from the fabric of mainland living. England's Holy Island became home to a monastic community in 635 AD. In Celtic mythology, Tir nan Og, the Isle of the Blessed, or the Island of Eternal Youth, was the place to which the soul migrates through the fog of death. Some unlucky islands are targeted for death, used for bombing practice in nuclear and chemical warfare tests. An inaccessible island makes an ideal prison. Alcatraz in San Francisco Bay is surrounded by treacherous currents. Only one man is known to have survived an escape from the rock, and he only made it as far as the Golden Gate Bridge. The Emperor Napoleon spent years as a prisoner on the islands of Elba in the Mediterranean and St. Helena in the South Atlantic. Another prison island has one very famous former inmate. Nelson Mandela was imprisoned on Robben Island off Cape Town for many years before becoming president of South Africa. There are plenty of more appealing islands. Private islands are no longer pirate lairs, but trophies for captains of industry. Some exclusive real estate deals are still available at a price. One island purchase may have been the best real estate buy in history. In 1626, the Dutchman Peter Stuyvesant traded trinkets worth about $24 for Manhattan Island. The rock-bottom price had no meaning to the Native American occupants. In their view, land was not something that could be bought or sold. Urban islands aren't the only ones that get crowded. On Christmas Island in the Indian Ocean, there are people and red land crabs. They've all had to learn to fit in, as the crabs breed by the million. But on many islands, humans are likely to put great pressure on wildlife. When people and domesticated animals arrive, animal castaways that came along for the ride can cause native species to become extinct. 3 islands in the Indian Ocean once supported the dodo bird until it was hunted into extinction by introduced animals, sailors, and colonizers. All that's left is the common expression, dead as a dodo. On Ascension Island in the mid-Atlantic, millions of seabirds are forced to breed on just a few offshore towers. The island itself is overrun by 500 feral cats descended from colonizers' pets. It doesn't take many predators to decimate a native species. The Stephen Island wren, the only flightless songbird ever discovered, was hunted into extinction by one lighthouse keeper's pet cat. Brown rats that have abandoned ship can threaten local species, but not where there are land crabs around. Any species that can hold its own against crabs can also withstand rodents. An island can be a lifesaver. In an emergency, NASA's space shuttle could use one of its emergency landing sites, which include Easter Island. An island may have saved the life of the famous flyer Amelia Earhart, but only temporarily. Some believe that during an attempt to fly around the world in 1937, she made an emergency landing on a Pacific atoll. There's still no clear answer to the question of how Earhart and her navigator died. If there isn't an island where it's needed, we can now make one. Japan has built more than 80 artificial islands, including an entire airport. This island and the Great Wall of China are the only two man-made constructions visible from space. But artificial islands are not a new invention. Venice, Italy was created in a lagoon when more than 100 small, muddy islands were built up with platforms of tree trunks and stone. Venice now offers some of the most elegant island living anywhere. Islanders and their visitors have been sending messages in bottles for centuries. It's a practice as mysterious as islands themselves. Will the message ever find its way, like an ancient seafarer, to another island? And if it does, where on earth will that island be? With at least 500,000 islands scattered across the planet and new ones in the making, the possibilities are endless.